Welcome everyone. I'm Jan Holland, and today we're going to talk about mediation, family mediation in terms of divorce. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Catherine Lucas and Arabella Joseph from the Resolution Practice. Welcome.
Thank you.
And before we start, I'd just like to read out a little bit about both of you. So Catherine Lucas is a registered family dispute resolution practitioner and accredited mediator who is passionate about guiding parties through the dispute resolution process and empowering them to negotiate future-focused, practical, and mutually satisfactory outcomes. Catherine was admitted as a lawyer in 2003, but now practices solely as a mediator and happily conducts legally assisted family dispute resolution, as well as working with parties attending without lawyers present. And Arabella Joseph is a registered family dispute resolution practitioner and a mediator accredited with the National Mediator Accreditation System. Arabella was admitted as a lawyer in 2001, but now practices solely as a mediator. She has experience in a variety of areas of law. Arabella is passionate about using dispute resolution to help families manage their conflict and separation to ensure that their children feel loved, supported, and safe. Arabella facilitates the mediation process so that all parties feel heard, acknowledged, and have the opportunity to move forward and thrive. Thank you, both of you. So let's start. And in the context of divorce and separation, mediation seems to play a significant role, especially when both parties are working out parenting plans or financial settlements. So first of all, could you tell us what is mediation?
Thanks, Jan. Well, mediation is a voluntary and informal but structured process that allows families to communicate and attempt conflict resolution using the guidance of an impartial and independent facilitator, which is the mediator. In the context of divorce and separation, that must be an accredited family dispute resolution practitioner. And you've mentioned that that's what Catherine and I do. Also, it might be helpful just to explain that we refer to family mediation, but it is also in the industry referred to as family dispute resolution. So just so some people might find that confusing, you know, there's kind of a couple of different terms. So there's sort of mediation, family mediation, and I guess the correct description now is family dispute resolution, just so people understand. And basically mediation or family dispute resolution, or FDR as we say for short, it's an alternative to going to court. And couples can use the process of mediation to make decisions about parenting matters and property settlements themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, so the parenting side, it's actually compulsory in that way. You have to do mediation before you can actually ever apply to court for orders about children's matters. So you will have to engage in mediation or family dispute resolution before you can even attempt to go to court. And parenting is really all about, you know your children best, so you can work out what they need from both of you, all the different elements that they need to be agreed upon for their future. And it's really about what is in the best interest of the child. So that's what the court looks at. It's what we look at. It's about being really child-focused in making all of those decisions, and that's the priority at all times. And then there's the property side of things. So property, that's not compulsory that you do mediation in advance in that way, but in property, you look at it's about what's fair and equitable for both parties. That's what the court looks at. And that's what we look at. And so whether you go to court or not, or even if you do go to court, you will be in parenting or property, mediation is really a big part of it, that they really do try to get the parties to make their own decisions before imposing a decision by a judge or as a third party on the parties. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what would you say are the benefits of mediation?
Oh, Catherine, I think so. I guess it's all about people making their own decisions. It allows people to have their say, explain what is important and why. It provides the opportunity for parents to communicate better, or in some cases for the first time in a long time, you know, if people haven't spoken, or if they're communicating via lawyers' letters, you know, there's a lot of room there for misinterpretation, misunderstanding, all that kind of stuff when they're not actually talking to each other.
Yes.
It gives both parties the opportunity to be listened to. So you get to have your say, and the other person has to sit there and listen. And this is, you know, really important, I guess, as Catherine alluded to, about the best interests of the child and what's important for children. It's really important when you're deciding how to co-parent. And as we said, the focus in family dispute resolution is always the best interests of the child. And, you know, we will always ensure that is the main focus during a parenting matter. Research tells us the most harmful thing about separation and divorce for children is the conflict they experience, not the actual divorce or separation. So mediation, you know, a real benefit in I guess in terms of a parenting matter is that it is a non-adversarial forum to decide, for people to decide how to co-parent in a way that's going to be best for their kids. So rather than see their parents battle it out in court, they can, you know, see their parents attempting to talk it out, I guess. And, you know, when you have children, you know, you're going to be associated forever. You know, you can't just sort of cut ties and never see or speak to that person again. So, you know, you might not always be best friends, but, you know, it might give you the opportunity to be able to agree on a way forward, you know, as co-parents, you know, that is sort of respectful and much less stressful for your children.
Yes. No, that's great.
Yeah. And I think the confidentiality is another really important element of mediation, which people don't often understand, which is it's confidential. So anything you tell us, we don't ever speak about to anyone. But even what one party tells us, we won't tell the other party. It's up to each party to communicate for themselves. And it's about the structure within which they do it. And by making it a confidential structure, you can really explore options. You can spitball any idea and consider other people's, you know, options without giving any ground. So I think, you know, when you've got lawyers involved and the court involved, no one wants to kind of give any ground. It's very positional. Whereas this is just, it's a real dialogue. And by making it confidential, like a bubble from that system, from that court system. So even if you go to court or you're already in court, nothing that is said in the mediation can be referred to in court. By making it confidential, you really cut through all of that back and forth and to and fro and positional sort of positions. And, you know, what might take months and months with letters going back and forth between lawyers can be done in 20 minutes. And you can really analyze the pros and cons of each element and discuss it. And so that's just, it's faster, you know, it's cheaper, it's more practical, because you can really focus not on each person's position, but on what the child needs, or in terms of a property matter, what's practical in terms of all of the elements, whether it's mortgages and living arrangements and all those types of things. Yeah.
That's
great.
And
I guess it might also be helpful just to talk about the process of mediation.
Yes, no, for sure.
Just so people understand sort of how it works. And also, I guess, you know, there are benefits in that as well, in that, you know, people are, I guess, what we really focus on is making sure people are prepared before the mediation. And so it really puts people in a strong position to be able to negotiate, you know, and meaningfully and make really informed decisions when they are mediating. So I don't know if you'd like us to kind of talk a bit about the process, sort of from
no, definitely. In fact, I was going to ask you to do that if you didn't do it. So because I think for somebody who's never experienced this before, or who's about to go through this, or who's in the legal process and they know they're going to have to use a mediator at some stage, especially if they're working out family plans and so on. I think it's really good for them to understand, because I suppose some of the questions I have are both people sitting in the same room? Like, if there's a lot of conflict, do you initially see them separately or together? And so, yes, I'd love all of those questions answered.
Okay, well, maybe I'll start sort of, if sort of how it begins, I guess. Couples may agree to attend mediation. It might be something that they've talked about and that they both agree to do, or it might be that one party initiates the process. So if that case, if one party initiates, then we will invite the other party to attend. That's, I guess, how it starts. The other party may or may not agree to attend mediation. As we've said, it's a voluntary process. So they may agree not to attend. But as Catherine said, if you're kind of heading towards court and that formal process, then at some stage the court will say, well, listen, you've got to go and try and work this out first. So you'll end up in mediation eventually, but that is, they don't have to agree to it. And I guess before we mediate, it's really, we're required to ensure that mediation is actually, or family dispute resolution is actually an appropriate form of dispute resolution for those particular people. So we're required to make sure it's safe and appropriate. And to do that, we have a confidential an individual meeting with each party, and that's what we call an intake. And so usually we do that on Zoom, just because that's the most convenient and time efficient way of doing things these days. People are busy, they're working, they've got their kids. It's really, really difficult sort of to go and have a meeting with someone. So we usually do that by Zoom, or we can do it by telephone. And it would basically be, what we're doing today. So we would have a meeting. It's an sort of an opportunity for each party to explain why they'd like to attend mediation, what they want to achieve out of mediation. It gives them an opportunity to, for us to gather some information. So we ask a whole lot of questions. Some of them might be a bit confronting or a bit difficult to ask, but they're things that we're required to ask. We ask everybody just to ensure that it's going to be safe for them to mediate. And it's an opportunity for us, while we're gathering information and to determine sort of appropriateness, and it also allows us to make sure that each party is going to be prepared. So that's during that time we say, we always recommend that you have you get legal advice. Some people come and they say, look, I don't know where to go. I don't have a lawyer. Can you refer me to someone? So, we have a really good referral base, so we can refer people, and there's lots of different types of lawyers. And so, we always have a discussion about who we think might be best suited for that particular person and their situation. If it's a property settlement, you might need some financial advice. You might need a mortgage broker. You might need to see a family therapist as a family. You might need some mental health support. So it allows us to refer people to the professional support and help that they need, and it also allows them time to prepare themselves, so they're fully informed. If it's property, then they can go off and get a list of their assets and all their financial documentation, and it gives them, maybe in terms of co-parenting matters, there's so many things, just from a practical perspective about how you're going to co-parent, where the kids are going to live, who's going to take Johnny to soccer this day, or, so sometimes they haven't actually thought about some things. And so it gives them an opportunity to go back and say, oh, okay, well, I didn't think about that. Okay, how do I want that to work? So it just gives us time to gather information, make sure it's appropriate, in a nutshell, and also prepare the parties for the mediation if we decide that mediation is going to be appropriate. And then, Catherine, you might want to talk about sort of, once we have decided that mediation's good, we're good to go, actually what happens on the day.
Yeah, so on the day, and usually, so it can be in person or it can be online like this, and then there are some other options which we can go into a bit later. But on the day, generally what would happen is Arabella and I would explain, just sort of the the ground rules for the day and how it's going to start. And then we're going to ask each party individually to explain what they want to achieve, what outcomes. And we use that information to prepare an agenda. That agenda, we kind of put into a logical order of what we have to deal with that day. And it just breaks it up into really manageable chunks. So if it's a parenting matter, it could be things like living arrangements, schools, holidays, those type of categories, you know. But it depends on the parties and their story. If it's property matter, obviously it's a little bit more sort of formulated. It's, you know, the assets and liabilities, it's the future needs, those type of categories. And so the agenda then gives us a sort of a guideline to structure the day, and then we go through each topic one by one. We really have a dialogue, a communication about each of those topics, what's best, what the options are, what each of you wants to achieve. And that breaks it down. From that, we get some options get generated under each of those categories. Once we have those options, and options are really important. It's important we don't just go down one path. We have to explore all the options so that everyone understands what's out there and what might work. And then there'll be some negotiations around that. We might have some private sessions at this point where each party can just have a break and just really think about what they want, and some bounce things off us about anything that's come up that might be difficult, or how they might want to structure it or propose something. And those private sessions are confidential again. And then there'll be some negotiation. And if there's an agreement, we can document that. Sometimes the parties go to lawyers to get the formal documentation done to turn it into orders. And there's lots of different ways it can be done. We can do a parenting plan with them, or they can get lawyers involved at that point to sort of document it, or they can just agree between themselves that structure and have it more fluid and flexible as meets their needs.
Fantastic, thank you. And one of the things that I know we discussed before is that sometimes you will have a half day rather than a full day, and that would appeal to me, I think, because I think it can be a very emotionally fraught and anxious in these situations. So to go through that in a whole day might be a bit overwhelming, or, you know, physically challenging. So just the fact that you have half days, I think, is really good as well.
Yeah, well, that's what you were saying, Arabella, about the intake is so important, because when we've spoken to you about your physical health and your mental health and the situation between you, like someone's got a bad back, they can't sit more than a certain number of hours, or if someone needs a support person there. So we can really tailor it to suit their individual needs. And if there's any safety concerns, we might suggest it be by shuttle, which means the parties aren't together at all, and we go between the parties and communicate between them, because that might be better within the situation and circumstances. So there's a lot of options to really, so that's where mediation is really flexible. Obviously, you know, a court process is really fixed and set, and mediation can be tailored to suit your needs. So as you said, like multiple half-day sessions. So, you know, no one has to have a long full day where you have to decide everything in one day and you're not sure. A half-day session, a week apart, 2 weeks apart, gives you an opportunity to get some advice or reflect in the meanwhile, come back and then make the final decisions, or work out the detail, get some advice in the meanwhile. And it's better to have that time to make good decisions that last, rather than having a really exhausting, overwhelming day and then you're not happy with the result at the end, because you kind of buckled, as opposed to, and we don't want anyone to do that. We want good, informed decisions.
Yes. No, I think that's wonderful, because I mean, you know, obviously there's an expense for the day, and if you feel that you have to make a decision because, you know, you don't want to pay for another day, then, you know, it's hard. Whereas if you know that you can have half days and then time in between to think about it and to get more advice, I think that's wonderful, actually.
Yeah, and if you're prepared as well, if you do a lot more preparation and have it a little bit later as well, it can be shorter. Like sometimes if everyone gets that advice early, it can just be that one half-day session. It doesn't have to be. You know, sometimes we do a half-day session for parenting and then a week later do a half-day session for property. You know, it depends on their situation, and we generally do them separately. So there's, you know, it can be online, it can be in person, it can be with lawyers, it can be without lawyers. We might consider having support people. So, you know, and the location, like we can really, it can be flexible to suit.
Yes. And I should imagine Zoom plays a big part these days as well, that you don't always have to be physically somewhere.
Yeah, it's really wonderful, actually. We're finding it's being used more and more in the industry widely, actually. Yeah.
And especially, I guess, when people are they're not in the same city. Like often people might be in different states. And so it just makes it so much more convenient for people. And you still get that face-to-face element. I mean, it's really great if you can, if it's safe and appropriate, it's really great to be in a room together face-to-face. That often works very well. But oftentimes that's not appropriate, or it's just not physically possible. So, and as Catherine said, that's something that we work out in the intake, what's going to be best. And people might feel, sometimes it's not for people to be face to face. They might want to be in a separate room, and so that can be accommodated as well. So it really is very flexible, and it really is. Preparation is key. That's our thing. Preparation. The more, because we really want people to, not everyone will agree. Sometimes people cannot agree. Sometimes people might agree on 3 out of 5 things, or 1 thing out of 10. But we always feel we want people to finish the mediation feeling like they've achieved something. And if you're prepared and you've taken that extra time to get all the advice you need, to really think about the issues, work out what it is that you want, then you kind of coming in and most of the work's done, I guess. Then you can spend that time in the mediation rather than going back and forward. You can spend that time sort of exploring options, and that's what's key, I guess, exploration and generating options and talking about what's going to be best for their children in terms of a parenting matter, and what's going to be really just and equitable in a property settlement. So we want people to be able to make the best use of the time, and so they're not spending money, not being able to agree, wasting time on all this back and forth, and then having to come and pay for another half a day session or a full day session.
Yes. No, that's great. And what I'm also thinking, because you both work together in your practice, you're actually great models for how to communicate, I should imagine, because not everybody thinks and feels the same way. So for you to mediate together, I think it would actually be a great role model for the people that you're mediating with. So, yeah, that's great.
That's right, Jan. It is all about kind of modelling cooperation and respect and being able to communicate. And I guess we think co-mediation is a great model because you do get to model that. And also, we obviously have different strengths, and we complement each other, I guess, in that way.
Yes, and I can also see that it's beneficial for your clients to have 2 wonderful heads.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. Because anyone who's been in a mediation, it can be stressful and emotional, and it's difficult, and it's really difficult for the people who are going through the separation. But it's also it's hard for the mediators as well, and it can be a long day. So it's really great having someone else there to be able to, maybe just be able to finesse or pick up on something, that someone else might have missed.
And it's bouncing things off each other, like, what as issues arise that might be difficult or ethical issues, we can bounce it off each other. And we really have the whole 2 heads are better than 1 approach to it. It's just really double that analysis and double that care, because if one of you is documenting something, someone else is seeing the faces and picking up what needs to, what those cues are. And I'm very grateful to have a partner in it, because as Arabella said, it's a really intense experience for anyone, and we feel it as well. So part of our preparation is even just realizing how emotionally exhausting and draining that day is. That's where, Jan, I think you have a lot, of value to add as well, just in that preparation for that, because there's such a big emotional element to it. Sometimes people haven't communicated in a long time and they're facing someone, and we really, really want people to break that deadlock, in a really structured way, and hopefully model the kind of behavior and communication that can go forward. You know, and being aware of how confronting and emotional it is on the day is a big part of it as well. Yeah.
No, for sure. I've found for my clients it's very confronting and emotional, and yes, I think they do need good mediators. So, thank you. And then, if someone is contemplating divorce or has just decided to divorce or separated, oh, I think you've probably answered this question, and knows nothing about the legal system or where to start looking for the support they need. Oh, we've just done this actually about the mediation process. So have you got any final points as to what you would like to say?
I guess in a nutshell, mediation, it's, as we've said, it's flexible, it's informal, it's much cheaper than going to court. You get to make your own decisions about your family. You know your children best. And it's, if you can make a decision about how you're going to move forward with your co-parent, rather than have a court-imposed judgment. I mean, that has to be better. It's better for your children if you can resolve your conflict, if they can see you trying to communicate and negotiate rather than sort of going off and battling it out in court. Mediation is a really supportive and structured method of dealing with conflict and attempting to resolve that, I guess, together.
Yes, and you also get to talk to the children as well, don't you?
There is an option for that. So we wouldn't really talk to the children. We'd use a child inclusive practitioner, so someone who's a specialist and experienced and trained psychologist is the person we would use, who does that and then gives feedback to the parents.
Okay.
And so that is an option, and that's part of that flexibility. But we generally wouldn't do it as a first off. It would be if there's a real deadlock, we might offer as an option. In order to have that voice of the child, because we always try to focus on what's in the best interest of the child.
Yes.
Sometimes that actual individual child's voice, but it has to be done in a way that's safe for the child and is not making them feel at all like they are making a decision about it. That's not their role, but it's about having someone who can ask a lot of questions and give that feedback so that genuine voice of the child can be heard in this room when people are quite positional.
Right. So when there's conflict and they're trying to work that out in parenting plans, there is a way for you to hear the voice of the child?
Yeah, because we're not trained specifically to do it. I would never want to do it personally.
No.
We've got
but I mean, it's important, isn't it, to know what the voice of the child is?
Yeah, I mean, you'd like the parents to be able to know and hear, and it's a difficult situation when that doesn't happen, and often those matters do end up in court, but it is an option that can really help. And if you did go to court, they probably would make an order that there'd be a child consultant meet with the parties. So it's just an option that can be done in this process as opposed to going and doing it in the court.
Yeah. And in that process, they would meet with the child, and then their feedback, that then the child consultant would then come to the mediation and they provide that feedback to both parents. So that's how it works. So the child is obviously not involved in the mediation at all. The child will meet with the child consultant and they ask questions in the way they do and get the information. And then the child consultant will then come to the mediation and provide that feedback to the parents so they can hear themselves.
Okay, right.
So the child that then does not attend the mediation like that. So it's very.
But the child consultant can attend the mediation.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And they will give the feedback to the parents. So they will both get to listen to kind of, I guess, what information that the consultant has been able to gather from the child or the children, and listen to that, and then they come in, they would provide that information, and then the mediation would resume with that knowledge, I guess. And hopefully
and that's important knowledge for both parents to have, I would assume.
Yes.
If there is that sort of conflict.
Yeah. So, and I guess, just in terms, the other thing that I think is important is it doesn't replace, mediation isn't an alternative to getting proper legal advice. That's something that we always recommend. People should always, before they attend mediation, speak to their lawyer, get some advice. People need to be informed about their rights. You know, they need to have a sort of a guideline on what's their best case scenario and their worst case scenario, just so that they are fully informed, and they can negotiate for the best outcome for their situation. So it's really important. They should still get legal advice, you know, and if appropriate, financial advice, but it sort of doesn't replace that. So just so people are aware that they still can be fully informed and have the advice. It just means that with that information, you know, they can make their own decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I can see that. I think because when it does, if it goes further through the legal system and a judge makes the decision, I mean, that's it. Whereas you in mediation, you somehow have some control over what's happening, but you don't know which way the judge is going to go. So
that's the thing. And also, I guess with mediation in a parenting plan, people put in reviews. You know, parents can say, okay, well, we'll try this way, and we're going to come back in 6 months and we're going to review it. We're going to see how it's going. You know, so nothing ever has to be set in stone. You know, you can, it's sort of, and you know, children grow and their needs change, and sometimes arrangements need to be finessed, you know, as kids get older. So it allows people, you know, and I guess people often do build in a review. They don't have to, but they might say, okay, well, you know, let's see how this works, and we'll come back, and if it doesn't work, then we'll try something else, and we can mediate about how we're going to go forward if this agreement hasn't worked, kind of thing.
yes.
And sometimes the mediation comes quite late. Like sometimes it's years after. Sometimes the status quo worked, or even in the last few years with COVID, sometimes there was just a status quo that worked, but it's all changing now that someone's working in a different way, or the children are going to high school. And so sometimes the mediation comes years after the separation, to suit that circumstance and those needs at the time. So
yeah. Oh, that's great. I can see that it's actually a very flexible process, and I love the idea that the children are at the center, that the decisions are for their best interests. And I think, you know, if there's an incentive for two parents to communicate better, then it's for the sake of their children. So look, you've given us so much to think about. I really want to thank you for that. And if people want to find out more about you, how do they do that?
So we've got a website, so theresolutionpractice.com.au, and I think, Jan, you could give anyone our contact details. We've got an Instagram page and a Facebook page too, if anyone wants to get in contact with us. But please, and we really happily will answer all your questions about it. We want to take that fear out of this unknown element that is mediation. Happy to answer questions so that you understand how it can work, or just even offer referrals so you can get prepared and then pursue it down the track. Yeah.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you so much to both of you.
Well, thanks, Jan. It's been lovely to have an opportunity actually to talk about it and explain it, because we do find a lot of people don't understand. And, you know, often when we invite people to attend mediation, they get a bit of a fright because, you know, they're kind of not sure what it is. So it's really nice to be able to sort of inform people.
No, I think that was really useful for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jan.
Thanks so much, Jan.
Bye.